Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com, here with the ultimate ESO Dragonknight guide. This guide is meant to help the new or returning player to Elder Scrolls Online understand what makes the Dragonknight unique, how and why you should use the skills and morphs, and also understanding the importance of the passives which make your Dragonknight so strong. I'll also give you my opinion on the ranking of the Dragonknight in the current endgame meta in 2022. So let's start off with an overview of the class and what makes it unique. Dragonknight overview. What do you need to know about the DK class? What makes it unique is its resource sustain via the Battle Roar passive in the Earthen Heart tree. This passive gives you resource back when you use an ultimate. Thus, the Dragonknight is centered around ultimate generation for resource sustain, healing, and no other class has this in this unique feel. The Dragonknight also focuses on a lot of damage over time or dot pressure for DPS, making the DK PvE DPS very hard and complex, but if you can pull it off, you're going to hit some of the highest numbers the Elder Scrolls Online has ever seen. Not to mention, the DK is one of the toughest on the battlefield because of the passives and the class skills it possesses. You can get stamina on demand back by activating certain abilities. You can get more block mitigation, more healing received, and so forth. Not to mention the Dragonknight has really good self-healing, both in terms of burst and heals over time. I consider the Dragonknight currently the second best overall class in the game, in the context of endgame PvE and PvP. So here's my ranking and breaking down of why they stand out so strong currently. If I were to rank the Dragonknight really quick in important categories in Update 33 Ascending Tides and going forward in 2022, here's where I put it. PvP stamina equals S tier. Stam DK has so much dot pressure and survivability. The only thing that matches it is really a Magic Dragonknight and a Magic Templar. Not to mention there's a plethora of sets making it incredibly hard to kill with massive burst and sustained pressure. Now PvP Mag DK is also S tier and considered probably the overall best in the entire game, both in terms of dueling, open world, small group, you name it. It's so good because it has great resource sustain, dot pressure, and burst healing, and has the trifecta of what makes your class extremely strong. Now if we switch gears and talk about PvE DPS, I would rank the Stamina Dragonknight as B tier. The reason why it lacks a lot of self-healing, and it's very, very hard to pull off. Yes, it can hit some of the highest numbers, but for the average or new player, it might be very hard to survive early on. PvE DPS Magic, I would rank S tier. Again, one of the highest DPS producing, but the difference between the Stam and Magic version is Magic has some self-heals built in just by throttling down and doing pressure. Very complex, but incredible damage. Healer, I would rank as a C. The major weakness of the class is really the healing. Yes, you can get major mending, but you really don't offer something very unique that the Templar does, the Warden, or the Necro. If you're wanting a DK healer, you can do it, but I don't think you're going to be very effective. Tanking, S tier. Why? The Dragonknight has unmatched resource sustain, utility for crowd control, and survivability. It's been staple in endgame tanking from day one until now. So you're going to want to pick up a Dragonknight if any of these things attract you. It's really, really good. So I'm going to break down the skills, the morphs, and the passives, why you need to slot them, when the context you would be using them, and what makes them so powerful. The first skill lineup is going to be Ardent Flame. Think of this tree as your damage over time, your sustained damage pressure. The first skill up is going to be the ultimate, Dragonknight Standard. What this is going to do base morph is flame damage for a very long duration. It's also going to apply Major Defile, reducing healing received. You'll also be able to proc a synergy for allies doing a lot of damage and immobilizing. Essentially, this is incredible damage over time, one of the most damage producing, if not the number one in the game in PvE, but it costs a lot and it's not mobile. Now you have two morph choices. We'll start with Shifting Standard first. This is really a PvP morph because you're allowed to recast it. So what you do is jump into the fight and then plant your banner down or Shifting Standard, and then when everything moves, you plant it down again. So that way you're constantly applying flame damage and pressure, but the most important part is Major Defile. Consider this a staple in PvP. Standard of Might is the other morph, and with this morph, you're going to get increased damage done, but also damage reduction. This is meant for stationary PvE DPS, and even when you're leveling, this thing will absolutely melt and is considered one of the best in the game. The downside is, it's not mobile, so you gotta be really careful of where you plant it, specifically in boss fights. Now let's cover the active skills. Lava Whip is up first. This is your main spam mode that procs off balance, still costs magic. Molten Whip is the first morph up, and while slotted, your other Ardent Flame abilities increase the damage done of your next Molten Whip. and weapon and spell damage. So what you can do is build up 3 stacks of Seething Fury for a really hard-hitting whip. Not to mention, keeping up these 3 stacks is just going to increase your weapon and spell damage. Consider this morph the more damage-producing one, and both Stamina and Magic Dragonites use it, though it costs magic because it's so dang strong. A Flame Lash is up next, so targeting off balance or immobilized enemies grants you a more powerful attack, which deals increased damage, cost half as much, but the most important part, it heals you. Consider this morph a little bit less damage overall than Molten Whip. It's not going to amplify your weapon and spell damage, but it's going to heal you. As a Dragonknight, you're very easy to set someone off balance or immobilize, so this is great starting out, even on a stand build, if you need a constant, big, massive heal setting targets off balance. Next up is the base skill Searing Strike. This is essentially your long-lasting damage over time. Does a little bit of damage up front, but a lot over time. Plus, it's going to apply the status effect. This is extremely important to understand, which I'll cover in the passives later. The first morph up is Venomous Claw. This converts it into a stamina ability and deals poison damage. The damage over time increases the longer effect lasts and instantly applies this poison status effect. So how you would use this is it turns into a stamina, and the poison, which is very useful for sustain, which we're going to cover a little bit later via the combustion passive. You want to basically cast this up front and let the damage soak over time and not recast it because it ramps up in damage later on. Burning Embers. This thing right now currently heals you based on the percentage of damage done when it ends, but in the new update 33 and going forward, it's going to heal you every second that it does damage. This does flame damage instead of poison. It also procs the burning status effect, which adds a 4-second damage over time. It's also going to feed in your sustain loop. The thing about this is, both in PvE and PvP context, the healing is so dang strong, and it's really what the Dragonknight lacked up until now, is a strong heal over time that you can just maintain. So Burning Embers when you're leveling, or even on a stand build with a hybridization of skills, consider it a really, really good ability. If you need extra healing, you can get it pretty early in the game. Next ability up is Fiery Breath. This is going to be your AoE damage over time in front of you. Starts out with the flame damage, and so it's a conal, so you shoot it out kind of in front of you, kind of in a cone or an AoE, but not in a 360 radius. The first morph up is Noxious Breath. This is going to convert it into a stam ability, deals poison damage, and also applies Major Breach to enemies, reducing their resistances. What you need to know about Major Breach is typically in a PvE group, a tank is going to provide this by doing their taunt. Mobs in PvE have 18,200 armor. So when you lower that, you increase your damage. So the more stripping of armor you can do, the better. Turns out this is a fantastic ability in solo instances because you don't have Major Breach a lot of the times when you're playing by yourself. So consider this a really good thing and a really good dot to maintain regardless if you have Major Breach or not. The other morph is Engulfing Flames. What's unique about this is very unique. The effect is going to increase damage of all flame attacks based on how high your weapon damage is, and the future patch will be weapon and spell damage combined. This is so unique, and why you want Dragonites in a trial, PvE, or a raid, because everyone's using a lot of fire abilities, a lot of fire staffs and ultimates. So you bringing this to the table in a group is fantastic because you can get up fire damage for 10% for everyone in the trial, which is 12 players. This is another reason that makes Dragonites so strong in PvE that everyone wants at least one to ramp up their flame damage. Next ability up is Fiery Grip. Essentially what this does is pulls a target to you. It's your simple chains or pull. The nice benefit of this is it gives you major expedition, so it increases your movement speed for a brief time. This attack cannot be dodged or reflected, so it's kind of a pain in the butt in PvP when you get pulled in. Not fun. Empowering Chains is up, and this is the morph that will actually act as a gap closer. You don't typically use this in PvE or even leveling. This is meant for probably PvP as a magic-based gap closer. Next ability up is Unrelenting Grip. This is used in PvE, and it basically pulls the mobs to you, but refunds the magic if you can't pull them. You can't pull bosses or targets that have been recently CC'd, so that's why you would get the magic refund. And essentially, you can just sit there and spam cast it to pull mobs in over and over and over. You also get the Major Expedition, which is really nice. Love this skill. Next ability up is Inferno. This is extremely unique. You can slot it on your bar and just get weapon and spell critical, and it scales in effectiveness off your highest offensive stats. So even though it does flame damage, if you're a stamina-based user putting your attributes in a stamina, you're going to get a lot of damage from this thing. It's god tier in PvE and PvP. Flames of Oblivion is the first morph up. Now, why is this so special? It launches 3 fireballs instead of 1, which is a new effect, and you can backbar this thing, cast it, and then every 5 seconds it shoots out this flame damage. It's great PvE or PvP if you're looking for a high damage, easy upkeep damage over time effect. The other morph is Cauterize. This thing is really strong self-healing. Fireballs heal allies instead of damaging enemies and increase the radius. That will also heal you as well, so you'll still get the benefit for slotting it, and you can put on your back bar, cast it, and every 5 seconds or so you're going to get healing. I'd highly recommend this starting out doing PvP, or if you don't lack a lot of gear and survivability, this is a great morph, PvE and PvP. Now we're going to talk about the passive. So the number one thing that you need to understand about the passives is the combustion passive. So I already talked about the status effects, burning and poison. When you afflict these, which you're going to have a higher likelihood of doing, burning is going to give you back magic, poison is going to give you back stamina. This is why the Dragoknights typically run the charge trait. The charge trait will increase the likelihood of applying status effects. So just doing light attacks, doing flame damage, doing poison damage, will constantly proc this and keep your resources sky high, way better than other classes just for throttling down and doing damage. So you need to kind of focus your build on, am I applying burning status effect or poison status effect frequently? If you're lacking damage and resource sustain, I would switch to the charge trait on your weapons regardless of what build you're running. Just make sure to enchant it with fire if you want some magic back, or enchant it with poison if you want some stamina back. Or dual wield and do both. The other 3 passes really just ramp up the damage and the duration, but the combustion is the main one to understand. Draconic Powers is up next. This skill line, think of it as buffs, crowd control, and the sort of tank tree. The first skill up is the ultimate, Dragon Leap. You're going to launch yourself at enemies, dealing physical damage to all of them, knocking them back for 4 meters and stunning them. Really, it's a low-cost bursting ultimate, mainly used in PvP. The reason you don't use this in PvE so much because Dragonknight Standard will outperform the damage significantly, though it costs a lot more. Take Flight is the first morph up, so this is going to do physical damage, knock enemies back, and stunning them. Typically, this is one of the highest tooltip, low-cost burst ultimates in the game. If you haven't done Dragon Leaps yet, they're just so much fun. Leaping off keeps, leaping off this, leaping off that. Hits like a Mack truck, knocks people back. You can do really fun, cool plays with it. Ferocious Leap is the other morph. So this is going to convert it from physical to flame damage. So think Magic Dragonnight's flame, proccing combustion. And after you leap, you're going to gain a big damage shield based on your max health. So this is more of the survivability. Oh crap, I just need a low-cost ultimate not to die. And great for a Magic Dragonknight. Our first active skill up is Spiked Armor. So Spiked Armor is going to give you Major Resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance by 500, 948 for 20 seconds. And it's going to return a little bit of magic damage back. Armor buffs are really important as tanking, obviously, in PvP. Typically in PvE, you don't run them, but the more armor you have, the less you get hit for. Hardened Armor is the first morph up, and you're going to gain a damage shield after casting this. This is typically the tankier option, mainly used in PvE. Volatile Armor is up next. This is the other morph, and this is really good in PvE and PvP. It's going to spray spikes around you, causing enemies hit to take damage over time. On a Magic Dragonknight, even a Stamina, this damage over time is significant. It's AoE radius and hits like a Mack truck. So the way I use this on my back bar is maintaining this all the time, and if a stealth or ganker tries to ambush me, I cast this and usually knocks them out of stealth because it's such a big radius and it's 360 degrees. Next ability up is Dark Talon. So this is going to be your crowd control ability. It's going to launch this little talons in the air, do flame damage, and immobilizing them for 4 seconds. Plus, an added benefit is allies can activate the synergy dealing flame damage. This thing does a lot of damage at endgame PvE and PvP. That's synergy. There's 2 morphs. The first one up is Burning Talon. So this is going to deal increased damage over time. The real reason you would use this is maybe you're going to do a CC tank in PvP, or you want some CC on your PvP main character. I don't typically take this morph on my Mag DK PvP, but it can be effective because of the damage over time. The other morph, Choking Talons, is a staple in endgame PvE tank because the enemies afflicted are going to deal less damage. I almost always slot this in PvE unless I'm just doing a single target boss frostbite because they cannot be immobilized, but for the trash mobs, you're going to use chains, and then you're going to use talons. You're going to be able to pull them in and CC them, lock them in place so other people don't get beat down. This is the reason everyone loves the Dragonites, is their utility and the control on the battlefield. Next ability up is Dragon's Blood. So this is going to heal you based on your missing percentage of health, 33%. You're also going to gain some key recovery buffs as well. This is going to cost magic, but it acts like a burst heal based on your missing health. So if you stack a lot of health, as in a tank, 40, 50,000, you're going to get a much higher heal. So if you have low HP, not that good. If you have high, really good heal. Green Dragon's Blood morph is up, and this is going to give you major endurance and minor vitality. Those two buffs make you a little bit tankier. This is primarily used for tanks or stamina DKs in PvP. I don't use it in PvE at all, besides my tank. Coagulating Blood is up next. This is God tier Mega Burst Heal for mag DKs because it heals based off of your max magic and spell damage, and it has reduced cost. So this acts as your main spammable heal. And one of the reasons magic Dragonites are so strong. So you want to hit the sweet spot with your max health in PvP so it heals a lot, but you don't stack too much health so it doesn't heal that much. So right around 30,000 in PvP is where I really like this. Next ability up is Protective Scale. So this is going to reduce your damage taken from projectiles by 50% for 6 seconds. It really has limited usage in PvE and PvP because it used to be much stronger and would reflect 100% of the projectiles back. Now it just reduces damage. Protective Plate. So this is going to get immunity to snares and immobilization. This is kind of a PvP mobility tool, but you probably want Sigic Order Race Against Time as you progress later on. So if you're doing lobby battlegrounds and want something so you don't have to deal with the snares and immobilizations, good option. Dragonfire Scales is up next, and this is going to reflect some damage back as flame damage. It's another decent PvP tank morph if you're tired of getting sniped and gankers hit coming at you at range. I typically don't use these abilities at all because there's a lot better things to slot. Next ability up is Inhale. This is a unique one. It's going to suck in, dealing magic damage and healing you for 100% of the damage cost. And after 2.5 seconds, it's going to breathe out, doing flame damage to nearby enemies. It's a big AoE, it's healing, and that delay is kind of fun and unique because you can flip to your front bar, your offensive bar, and do a little bit of damage, and then boom, it blows up at the exact same time. Deep Breath is our first morph up, so this initial hit interrupts enemies that are casting, and the final explosion deals more damage. So it's good for tanking if you can't get all of the interrupts. So some of the PvE encounters in this game are very intensive on getting interrupts, and sometimes you have to lock your block down to get those bashes off. If you do that and a heavy attack comes in, you're dead. With this thing, you can just hold block and cast it and get that final interrupt. It's very, very useful. Draw Essence is up next, and this is bigger heal. So the initial heals for more. Final explosion refunds magic for every enemy struck. This is just great healing and damage at the same time. So the more people that are dogpiling you, the more enemies in PvE that are dogpiling you, the more this heals and the more damage and less magic it costs. So you can kind of just keep it up. I put this on my back bar when I'm like, oh crap, I need a big heal, and when I'm getting dogpiled by a bunch of enemies or players. Bang, hit it, flip my front bar, and then go on the offensive. Okay, so now we're going to pull up the passives, and the two that you really need to understand and why it makes the Dragonite so powerful is Iron Skin and Burning Heart. Iron Skin is going to increase the amount of block by 10%. This is one of the main reasons you see DK tanks in PvP is using Sword and Shield all the time because it's so strong. The Burning Heart passive, while a Draconic power ability is active, your healing received is increased by 12%. So maintaining your armor buff in both PvE and PvP gives you increased healing. The great thing about this increased healing is it stacks with major and minor vitality too. So you can run sets and abilities that give you minor and major vitality, increase your healing even further. Not to mention that the scaled armor increases your physical and spell resistance as well, making DK so survivable for just maintaining a buff or two. Last skill lineup is Earthen Heart. Consider this kind of like your buff and resource sustain skill line with the most important passive in the game maybe. The first skill up is our ultimate, Magma Armor. You're going to pop this and it's going to limit incoming damage to 3% of your total max health and dealing flame damage to enemies in the area. This is God tier, oh crap, survivability ultimate because it caps incoming damage. You can still die through this, but it's going to be very, very hard. Magma Shell is the first morph up. When you activate this, this, nearby allies gain a powerful damage shield. This is a really nice damage shield and primarily used in PvE or PvP tanking as an oh crap button to help allies, especially in dungeons and trials. Corrosive Armor is up next. This is one of the most strong, if not the strongest overall ultimate in the game. The reason why, you still get the damage limit by 3%, but you get 100% penetration on direct damage abilities. That way, as a PvPer, I can use the charge trait instead of sharpened or something else. When I pop corrosive, I'm going to melt people like butter because that physical and spell resistance is going to be reduced from my direct damage abilities like whip, whirling blades, and so on. So you're insanely hard to kill. You do AoE damage around you. It only costs 200 ultimate, and you get 100% pen on direct damage. I almost entirely use this in PvP, and very limited in PvE because standard still outperforms this in terms of damage. Active skills up, and we have Stone Fist first. This is quite an odd ability. You can use it as a main spammable to start the game. I have not found it useful at all at endgame, to be honest with you. Obsidian Shard is up next. This is the first morph. It's going to convert it to a magic-based ability that now heals you or two allies after doing damage. So this would be something you want to pick up if you lack healing straight off the game and you need something to get by. Stone Giant is up next. People call this the poop attack, and enemies are staggered. So that's the effect that you get, making them take bonus damage from all attacks. So in PvE tanking, you're going to see people wanting to proc that stagger status effect, increasing damage, but outside of that, it's kind of a niche skill. Molten Weapons is up next, and this is going to give you and your group allies major brutality and sorcery, increasing weapon damage and spell damage by 20%. Typically, endgame players run potions to get this buffs 100% of the time, so it's not really that useful unless you're starting out and you just want to get those buffs straight away. Igneous Weapons is up next, and it increases the duration and increases the radius. So again, a niche skill, but you can use this in a trial or a raid or a PvP group, so it can free up abilities and potions for people. Outside of that, pretty weak. The Molten Armament, your own damage from heavy attacks is increased. So a lot of folks run this for weird, goofy PvP builds where they just want to heavy attack people and gank them. I don't see a whole lot of people running it in PvE. Outside of that, pretty niche and limited. Obsidian Shield is up next. So this is going to give you a shield that absorbs damage. It scales off your maximum health, so ideally really good for tanks, and gives you major mending, increasing your healing done by 16% for 2.5 seconds. This is a good skill, costs a lot of magic, but it gives you major mending, so very, very useful on tanks or stamina DKs that need a little bit burst healing. Igneous Shield is up next, and this is going to increase the shield strength on yourself, so this is really, really good for tanks who stack a lot of health and stack shields in PvE. Frag Shield is up next, and it's going to increase the duration of major mending. So the longer duration major mending means you can cast this magic skill and then cast something like Resolving Vigor right after it, and what that will do is give you a lot more healing versus just a little bit of Resolving Vigor. But it costs a lot, so it's hard to maintain on any magic or stam build. Petrify is up next, and this is going to be an unblockable, undodgeable stun. One of the best in the game. Has a little bit of range, but you can't avoid it. So if you're able to be CC'd and the circle around your feet is no longer there, you get about CC immunity, I think right around 6 to 7 seconds. So as soon as that's down, you can stun someone again. Fossilize is the first morph up, and one of the strongest CCs in the game because not only you can avoid it, but you're going to be immobilized for 3 seconds. So when someone fossilizes you, they usually get behind you and start beating the crap out of you in PvP or PvE if you want it. So you're going to have to break free and spend a ton of stamina, and then you're going to have to dodge roll to get out of the immobilizations. One of the most important lockdown PvP skills in the game. Shattering Rock is the other morph, and so what this does is when the stun ends, you're also healed. This is a really good morph if you just need a little bit of extra healing in PvP. Ash Cloud is up next. This is really good ground-based AoE healing, especially while leveling. You throw it down on top of you, and you kind of sit in there, and you and your friends are healed pretty significantly. Cinderstorm is the morph of this, and this heals for way more. So I love this skill on both PvE and PvP if you need extra healing, especially if you're starting out the game and you're kind of struggling with that end. Make sure to backbar this, throw it down on top of you, and you'll be hard to kill. Eruption is the other morph, and instead of dealing healing, it deals a lot of damage. This thing is god tier damage over time, and something that lasts a long time, so it's a bit easier to maintain. Plus, it's going to proc all the Earthen Heart juicy passives that we have, so great at endgame PvE DPS. Now let's get to the passives, and Earthen Heart, in my opinion, has some of the strongest passives in the game. So the two I want you to focus on are Battle Roar. This is the foundation of DKs. This is why you run things like ultimate generating monster sums like Blood Spawn, heroes, and potions, and so forth. Your resource sustain is tied to how much ultimate you use on demand. So the faster you generate ultimate, the more you use, the more resources you get back. So at 500 ultimate, you're going to get 25,000 health, magic, and stamina across the board, making Dragoknights one of the strongest resource-sustaining classes in the game, especially with the charge trait on your weapon. The other one I want you to understand is Mountain's Blessing. So what you're going to do when you cast an Earthen Heart ability, you and your group is going to get Minor Brutality, so increasing your weapon damage by 10%. This is unique to the Dragonknight, so this is what you bring to the raid and to the table as a solo player, increasing your weapon damage. No one else can get this buff unless you use potions and poison, some other goofy things. So that's a really good thing that Dragonknight has. The second part about it is the more important part. When you cast an Earthen Heart ability, while you're in combat, generate 3 ultimate, and it can occur every 6 seconds. So what you do is you constantly cast an Earthen Heart ability like Cinderstorm or Igneous Shield or something to generate ultimate. And then it feeds into your Battle Roar, thus getting more ultimate more quickly. So constantly slotting something both in PvE and PvP to constantly generate ultimate is going to be your go-to bread and butter. Not to mention a passive like Helping Hands is your on-demand stamina sustain. So when you cast a non-stamina costing Earthen Heart ability, thanks Cinderstorm here, you restore 990 stamina. So you can just sit there and channel your magic abilities while you're in combat, just casting it over and over if you're low on stamina to feed up. Thus, Dragoknight's resource sustain insane, along with the dot pressure. All right, check out my website, link in the description below for a very detailed guide on these builds, but just in case you're looking for a reference point of what I use at endgame, here's a list. I'm going to go through magic and stam, both PvE and PvP, along with tank and healer for PvE. Well, gang, that's a video. I hope you got something out of this. This was meant for the newer returning player. Dragoknights are one of the best in the game, if not the best overall class in the game. PvE, PvP, tanking, DPS, running solo. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. If you like this video, go check my website out. I have recommended builds for PvE, PvP. I play them all the time on twitch.tv/Deltiasgaming. And most importantly, if you want me to cover the other classes, I'd be happy to do so. So leave me a comment below. Hit that like, subscribe if you like this type of content, and I'll keep doing it. Thanks for watching.